Sponsored by New Orleans Distillers, creators of fine spirits and liqueurs. Through dedication to science, art, and passion, blends of tradition and flavor emerge. For you, always locally crafted. New Orleans Distillers, classically Southern.
Tonight, the White House says Russian invasion of Ukraine is now imminent and could come at any time. And with interest rates about to rise and the Russian troops on the border of Ukraine, the stock market tumbles, and we are in a correction. We'll have that and more tonight on Wall Street Wrap-Up. Hi, and welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up. I'm Andre Laborde for this Friday, February the 18th, 2022. Hope your week went well. Well, if you're with us last week, we talked with Major General James Livingston, Medal of Honor recipient, and we discussed troop movements of over 190,000 Russian troops that are now on the Ukrainian border, all while telling the world they have no plans of invading the country. Well, due to the time, we were not able to get into other hotspots around the world, such as China, Afghanistan, the state of the U.S. military today, and yes, more of the Ukrainian situation. Well, tonight, we have our second part of our conversation with Major General James Livingston. Well, the White House has told all Americans inside Ukraine that they should be leaving immediately, and there's been an evacuation of the U.S. embassy, and probably invasion is, as they said, now imminent. As a U.S. Marine captain on the battlefields of Vietnam, Major General Livingston was awarded our country's highest award for valor, the Medal of Honor. At the time, Captain Livingston continued in the Marines and had a long 33-year-plus career in the Corps. He served in many locations and led many Marines in everything from a rifle company to thousands of men. And his last command was of all Marine Reserves, as we know it, in the military as MAR-4-Res, which is Marine Forces Reserves in New Orleans. Major General James Livingston will be here with us tonight, but first, this just in today. As we've reported in the past, the Federal Reserve came under intense criticism for trading stocks while at the same time deciding on interest rates that affect the stock market. Well, today, new rules were announced for any sitting Federal Reserve board member to have better transparency and solidify trust in the Federal Reserve. Now, the officers and officials who sit on the board who decide monetary policy, those Federal Reserve governors will no longer be able to trade individual stocks, bonds, mortgage-backed securities, and more. And they will not be able to trade in cryptocurrencies or be involved in short selling of stocks, nor will they be able to trade on sector funds. Now, these trading rules take effect as of May 1st of this year. And now, how did the markets do this week? Well, the Russian-Ukraine tensions sent stocks lower and all indexes in the red for the week. The Dow, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ all posted their second weekly losses. And this week, the Dow Jones ended at 34,079. It was down 1.9% for the week. The S&P 500 ended at 4348, which was down 1.5% for the week. And the NASDAQ, they ended the week at 13,548, which was 1.75% for the week. The Dow posted its worst week since January 21st. Well, let's get to our guest tonight, Major General James Livingston. He spent over 33 years in the Marine Corps. He started off as a second lieutenant, and he ended up as Major General. And as a Marine captain while in Vietnam, he was awarded the nation's highest award for heroism and bravery, the Medal of Honor. His last command was head of all Marine Force Reserves in New Orleans, Louisiana. And best of all, he's here with us tonight. Hi, General. Welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be talking with someone from New Orleans.
Well, New Orleans sure misses you, General.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it was a great time in New Orleans with all you great folks.
General, I got a question. You know, there's so much going on in the world today, and in regards with what's going on right now with Ukraine, what should America's position be with regards with Putin on the borders right now of Ukraine?
Well, first of all, we reduced our position of strength. And, we look at our armed forces and what we've done with them and what we're attempting to do with them when cutting the budget. And the only thing they respect is strength. I think the thing is that we can collect our allies and all talk from a common sheet of music. In the short term, that is the best possible solution we can come up with. The next thing we need to do is cut off their source of capital. And this administration allowed that to happen through the pipeline. If they can deal with Germany and cut off that source of capital to Russia, I think those are two opportune moves we can take right at this particular point and show that we're in a position of strength. I think particularly with the pipeline, I see that as one of the most strategic moves we can make.
Did it surprise you, General, that right after President Biden took office, they closed the Keystone pipeline and he reinstarted the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in Europe? I
absolutely can't figure that out. I've run through these options through my mind, and I frankly don't understand, particularly the one in Europe. I think the one in the U.S. was he was appealing to the people in his party that had elected him, the people that go on the green side, if you will, and our global warming side. But the one with between Germany and Russia, I have never been able to understand that. And it was so clear to me that he was opening up a funding source for Russia that should have never been realized by them. And we're in this position, to me, because of the mistakes, strategic mistakes that President Biden has made right after he was inaugurated on the 20th of January. It dumbfounds me.
He's been saying that if Russia moves into Ukraine, there will be great sanctions. And there are many, even in both parties, that are saying that we should put the sanctions on now to show him, not do it after the fact. Do you think that they should wait for sanctions? Do you think they should do it before? Or really, sir, do you think that the sanctions will have any effect whatsoever?
I don't think the sanctions are going to have any impact at all. I think the biggest thing they can do is cut off that pipeline. Mm-hmm. You know, here's a country just economically constructed like we are, and we think of sanctions and what it would do to the impact of this particular country. You got to look at Russia as a totally different political alignment. And I don't see sanctions really being a big issue with the Russians right at this particular point. They can always reach out to China and probably get whatever they need in terms of the type of support they might need. But, you know, this thing, like I say, we have boxed ourselves in based on the initial actions of this administration. We're dealing with a weak hand now, as far as I'm concerned.
I was watching this week, in fact, I think it was General Jack Keane, and retired Army Chief of Staff of the Army, and he brought he brought up something that was very sobering to me. He said, unlike in past years, the United States today is not able to handle a two-front war. And by that, I'm talking about how, like, let's say World War II, we had Germany and Japan as our adversaries. Today, and I'm thinking of, let's say, Russia and China, we would not be able to handle two fronts. Would you agree with General Keane on that?
Absolutely. And, you know, we used to advocate two-front war and maybe even a third conflict of a smaller dimension going on. And now I don't even feel confident we can handle either one of these conflicts, the way we've got our forces aligned, the way we're funding these forces. And the fact is we've got them split now between two strategic theaters. And I just don't know how we're going to reinforce those theaters. And, you know, sending a couple of thousand airborne guys, it's just a tripwire. And I think the thing we got to really watch now, and this is my own feeling, I haven't in any way to corroborate it. There's something going on in eastern Ukraine, you know, where the people who sympathize with Russia, and you recall they moved some Russians into Ukraine years ago. And what's going on in that, there's an insurgency going on against the country of Ukraine now, and they're sort of not part of the country in any respect as we would think of being part of a country. What is going on there? Are they trying to trip something up where these people say they're threatened and have the Russians come in there respond to a potential threat of the people they construe are their friends and citizens? I think that's the place right now we really need to watch is eastern Ukraine.
General, that's an interesting point because it reminds me in 2014 when they moved into Crimea, and I think it was just this week they were talking about what they called a false flag. In other words, Putin would purposely have maybe someone fire upon his military going, well, they
Yeah.
fired first.
I feel very confident the oil production capability of Russia, if we can put it in jeopardy in the fact that they can sell oil, is the biggest thing we can do. And that's exactly what they ought to do now. They ought to say, one step, we cut off the oil. But if you know, you go back in history, I think it was Clinton administration, you recall Ukraine used to have nuclear weapons. And part of the agreement to do away with those nuclear weapons was the fact that we would guarantee their safety. We would have preserved their country and defend them against anyone who was trying to threaten their country. So those are things that are on the table already. And a lot of people forget about that guarantee based on them getting rid of their nuclear weapons.
General, I'm glad you brought that up, because I have found very few people who even know about the Budapest Memorandum. And that was what you were talking about. It was in 1994. And just like you mentioned, that it was signed by Bill Clinton and I think the United Kingdom and also I think even Ireland, that if they gave up their nuclear weapons, we would protect them to do it.
That's exactly right.
They did it.
So we're obligated to them.
Yeah.
And the other issue with Ukraine and Russia, this thing that carries back to when Biden was vice president and when he was dealing with Ukraine. I don't know what the tie-ins are, and I'm not in position to understand it, but what are the real true tie-ins between Biden, Ukraine, Russia, based on what we see in the paper every day involving the first family? And I tell you, it's really something that we need to consider in this equation.
If he does go into Ukraine and take that over, will he then start getting more emboldened? And I'm thinking of our hemisphere, specifically Venezuela, a socialist country like Venezuela, and a communist country like Cuba. Do you think that he would then go back, like as of October of 1962, of going back into Cuba with nuclear missiles just to rub it in our nose?
I'm not sure that would be the case, but I look at what China's already doing. If you look at the Panama Canal and what the Chinese are doing in the Panama Canal, what they're potentially doing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Russia. It can be China. It can be one of the other sort of Iran and some of those other countries that involve with these folks, because these people are playing us in a total game atmosphere. And my sense is Russia may not play the game, but China's going to play it, or Iran's playing it. And we already see that taking place in Central and South America. China is in the Panama Canal, and we don't understand the threat they potentially pose to the Panama Canal. And also they are establishing a relationship with Nicaragua and some of those other countries down in that area. So we're not only looking at Russia, I'm looking at China. And if they go into Ukraine, what's going to happen between China and Taiwan?
True.
And this is a very threatening atmosphere that we're involved in today.
Yeah.
And we can't just look at Russia and Ukraine in isolation. We have to look at the totality of what's going on all throughout the world involving Russia, China, and Iran, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I think from what I understand is that the Beijing Winter Olympics ends on February the 20th. So I would assume that possibly that Putin does not want to anger or irritate his closest ally, China, and do anything while the Olympics is going on. But after February 20th, though, then that would be more of a buildup. General, I'm curious too. When it comes to China, like what you mentioned, in bring it back again, October of 1962, when we had those 8 to 10 days of the world was tedious, whether or not Khrushchev was putting missiles in Cuba. What China did was China invaded India. So while the news media and all the eyes were on Cuba and the United States, China made a move to India. Do you think that, out of just your thoughts, Xi Jinping with China, is that when Putin does make that move in Ukraine, then he would make that move, Xi Jinping would make that move to Taiwan?
You all offer a great question here. And the thing that I'm sort of thinking is Ukraine and Russia a rouge of some sort to give China a position to get prepared to invade Taiwan. Right now, all eyes are tied down on Ukraine, primarily Ukraine and Russia, and that's the conversation. But is there a bigger conversation going on after the Olympics in terms of some sort of way to tie us down and put China in a strategic position to be prepared to invade Taiwan. That is the one that I'm looking at. I mean, this is just old classic sort of military basic 101 Marine thinking. Something that's going on. There's an interplay going in there we don't understand. And I think the critical date it will begin to unfold and give us some of those senses that is after the Olympics. What's those 10 days or so after the Olympics?
Sure. General, hold that thought. Okay, if you're just joining us, we're talking. Very happy to have Major General James Livingston. And we're going to take a break right now, but don't go away. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're talking with Major General James Livingston. You've commanded everything from a rifle platoon to Mar 4 Res to maybe even more so. What are your thoughts? Putin has last I heard, over 130,000 men in the frigid winters of Ukraine, trying to keep morale, warmth, clothing, feeding. He's going to have to do something. I mean, he's either going to have to either take it all down or move. And right before going into a break, we were talking about February 20th, which is the ending of the Olympics. So they've got men there that have been there for a very long time in the frigid winters of Ukraine. You've commanded large areas, battalions of men. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's, getting back to my thoughts earlier, there's something going on that's bigger than this Ukraine-Russian situation that we're talking about now. That's the reason I think there's some sort of relationship in terms of what's going to happen after the Olympics and what's going to happen between China and Taiwan. I think that's the bigger play that's going on now, based on my estimation. The Chinese, have sort of been ramping this up, and there have been a desire for a long, long time. If you go back to Quemoy and Matsu years ago, probably long before your time, when they were shelling one another. This thing has been going on historically since the people left China and moved to Taiwan to establish that as a new country. I think there's a bigger relationship here going on, and that's the reason I think we see what's going on. Otherwise, I think Putin would have made an earlier move. I'll agree with you. I think this is an action we got to watch very carefully, but I'm not sure that we got clarity on what's going to happen here. Sure. But in my mind, the biggest clarity right now is what's going to happen between Taiwan and China.
Just recently, I heard where Russia, China, and Iran have agreed to do war games together, and they've also agreed to do a pact together. Well, my first thought, I love history, and I was thinking of the 1940 Tripartite Act. Where, you had Germany, Japan, and Italy that sort of like their version of NATO. So is this something that we should be very concerned on, about the war games of Iran, including with Germany, including with Russia and China?
I absolutely agree with you. Almost look at it as a replica, of the same thing, or China's Japan, and what's going on with Russia's to Germany, and down with the and Iran, you look at that being in Italy. It's an exact sort of replay of it, and in my mind, we sort of been wrapped up to a world war, but it's probably going to be a different kind of world war if we don't sort of take control of this situation and show some sort of strength that this administration is not showing. Yeah. We're in a dangerous situation right now, and anything could trigger this. And I think the big trigger that you spoke about earlier is the day the Olympics end. What is going to happen in the first 10 or 12 days?
You'd brought up, sir, about Afghanistan, and I was there for 18 months. I know it very well, not Karzai Airport, but certainly Bagram and such. What do you think we should have done when it came to Afghanistan?
I think, well, first of all, we should have saved that big airport. We should have never done away with that big airport, which gives us the capability to evac. And when we did away with the airport and moved closer to Tehran, closer to Kabul, that give them that precluded us from having the option that we needed to do the proper evacuation. I think what happened there was this. We made a quick decision to go in and try to attempt an evacuation, which I'd planned to do to Saigon. I'd planned for over 3 months. We're involved in the planning for that. My concern is that we just didn't go through the proper planning steps. We didn't know what we were doing, and they just wanted out, and we wanted out at all costs. Mm-hmm. And so we made every military mistake I can think about in the world as how we coordinated and executed that operation. It was the most disgusting thing that I ever looked at in my life. And we got the finest military in the world, and they had some of the best planners in the world. They could have done that first class. And for us to withdraw under them circumstances, to me, was absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah. General, I know with television, optics are important, and you were talking about you were very much involved, and also that famous picture of Vietnam where the last helicopter was on top of, I think it was with the Saigon embassy. And I know that from what I understand, the administration said that they wanted no helos, no helicopters flying over our Afghanistan airport. But the picture that will, I think, stay in a lot of people's minds is that U.S. Air Force aircraft about to take off and people were hanging on would rather hold on. Do you see the similarity there between that picture of the helo on top of the embassy in Saigon and that airplane about to take off with Afghanis holding on?
No, I don't see any similarity at all. But in terms of that evacuation operation, the operation, there was no issue with it whatsoever. We flew helicopters for almost 16 hours. We brought everyone out. It was perfectly coordinated. It was a trying situation to me because I lost about 40 Marines during 67, 68 during that war. But as far as the end actions there, the evacuation of Saigon, it went about as well as any military operation you can ever be associated with. And the last two helicopters, it was shameful. It was shameful to me because we did not have to be there. If we had had the military will to do the things and the political will to do the things that were all the way accomplished in 73, the North Vietnamese were ready to come to the table to give up when the B-52s kept flying over Hanoi. But, the thing about it, we didn't have the political will to stay there. But as far as the execution of the final event of Vietnam, the evacuation of Saigon, and also the evacuation of Cambodia, both of them went terrific. There was no issue associated with either one of those operations. And, the Marine pilots, the Air Force pilots, and the people who coordinated that were remarkable military operators, something that we can be particularly proud of. We had the capability, but we did not use it in Afghanistan. We did not take the military steps, the military planning steps to make sure that was a first-class operation. And it was and I can understand the young people who served in that war and how they feel about it emotionally. And I didn't serve there, but I feel emotionally, and I can feel their pain because we had the capability to make sure that if we had to get out, we could have done it much better and much more professionally. And what that has done, that has demonstrated the weakness of the National Command Authority and how they reacted to that evacuation. My concern is, and I think a lot of people are concerned, are they going to react in that same fashion, that same weak fashion in Ukraine or in Taiwan? Mm-hmm. We don't have a good track record for the last year whatsoever.
I'm curious, sir, just what you were talking about just now. At one time, the United States' vision of victory was, my thought of, let's say, World War II, which was a complete surrender of the Japanese and German forces. But with Korea, with Vietnam, with Afghanistan, there was this unknown, is there a victory? And including with Afghanistan, we handed the country back over to the Taliban. Do you think our vision of how military wars are fought will be different today than they were at one time? Absolutely.
Yeah. We don't have that total win mentality. If you recall,
the complete surrender,
of which we were in World War II, is unconditional surrender. You quit. you're done. You're out of business. We started that sort of lesser victory, if you will, for lack of a better term, in Korea, and it just continued to permeate in the military. And it's not the military. It's the political will. You know, when we started war on terrorism, I was in New Orleans, and I give a speech, and everyone was, hoorah, we go into war, and we're really going to take all those bad guys out in Iraq. I give a speech out in Kenner, and I said, you know, my concern is, and our closing comment was, do we have the political will to stay the course? And I said, looked at the audience in New Orleans, and I said, I don't think we do. And you saw what happened in Afghanistan. And I still stand by that last sentence, the last comment I made at that speech. Yeah. We don't have the political will.
General, I've got a lot more to talk to you about. I hope this may not be the last time. I hope you come back with us.
Anytime I can come down to New Orleans, go to Pascal Manales and Commanders, I'll be there, okay?
You got a deal. There'll be a table with your name on it, I promise.
Okay, buddy.
Okay.
God bless you.
Major General James Livingston, U.S. Marine Corps.
Happy Mardi Gras.
Thanks a lot, General. Well, if you've got a question about finance or a comment about the show, we'd love to hear from you. Make it pithy and concise and write us at Andre@WallStreetWrapUp.info. And now for a look ahead for next week. But first, on this day, February the 18th, back in 1688, what company was started and what industry was founded in a coffee house? We'll have the answer in just a moment. On this day, February 18th in 1688, what company was started and what industry was founded in a coffee house? Lloyd's of London. In Edward Lloyd's coffee house, the birthplace of Lloyd's of London and the start of the insurance industry. Well, finally this week, Prince Andrew of England has settled a lawsuit by Virginia Guffey, who said that when she was 17 years of age, he had sexual relations with her underage at 17. Well, this was during the time of his association with financier and sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein, who later died in jail. Andrew's mother, the Queen of England, has stripped Andrew of his royal title and all military honors due to the sexual lawsuit. No word on what the prince or maybe the palace had to pay for this lawsuit for it to go away, but I'm sure it was a princely sum. Well, next week on Wall Street Wrap-Up, we'll be talking with investigative business reporter Charlie Gasparino. Charlie's the business reporter for Fox Business and for Fox News. Prior to that, he was doing the same at CNBC. He's broken many business stories, and with the jury finding Elizabeth Holmes guilty of fraud as the CEO of Theranos to the possible insider trading on Capitol Hill, Charlie has reported on it all. He's also a columnist for the New York Post. From Fox Business, Charlie Gasparino next week. And as a reminder, we repeat the show on Sunday mornings, but always the best way is to set your DVR so you'll never miss an episode. And that's our show for this Friday, February 18th, 2022. Hope you've enjoyed it. My thanks to Major General Livingston for joining us this evening, but as always, it's you. We appreciate you for allowing us into your homes tonight. Remember, you can always follow us on all the social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and WYES.org. So have a great weekend ahead and a productive week as well. I'll see you next week. For Wall Street Wrap-Up, I'm Andre Laborde. And remember, money never sleeps. Good night.
Sponsored by New Orleans Distillers, creators of fine spirits and liqueurs. Through dedication to science, art, and passion, blends of tradition and flavor emerge. For you, always locally crafted. New Orleans Distillers, classically Southern.